Hi everybody, this is Warren Herman, and today we're going to speak about a very important subject on the nature of religious vocation. Because sometimes in our lives, I believe that we can be almost deceived into thinking that we have a religious vocation, or we might be in a situation where our vocation needs purification. And this is very important because there are ways in which this kind of vocation is contrary to spiritual growth and is independent of the normal process of spiritual healing in the Christian tradition. And so obviously there's a lot of, this is a kind of a conjectural thing, but I'm just sharing some things that they think are observations that could be helpful in this regard. And so one of the things we have to realize is that many times when we think we have a religious vocation, we seem to have an unknown kind of fixation on this idea. This idea seems to come into our minds and seems to kind of take hold of us and kind of clog up our things. We kind of worry, maybe I have this vocation. And I think that when that is the case, something else may be going on. Especially if you notice kind of going back and forth about whether you have a vocation or whether you're really firm in it, there's a chance that there might be something else going on that at least needs to be purified out to see if something is left over after this purification takes place. Because what can happen is that there can be roots to these thoughts. Sometimes we mistake, I believe, an obsession with an inspiration. And the thing is that, really this can happen very easily because, usually, I'm just getting very warm, so I'm going to open the window to the vehicle here. So now the window is open. But the thing that can happen is that, we really end up with a strange situation, because usually we think of addictions as disturbing things. Like if somebody just said, hey, I don't like family life because things were terrible in my childhood, so I want to run away and I want to just run away and live a wild life. You'd say, okay, well obviously that's dysfunctional. But the problem is, just like when Jesus talks to the Pharisees, sometimes our ways of running away can look good. And when our ways of running away look good, then we can be stuck in them. Like the Pharisees, it looked good. They were trying to follow the law. I mean, the tax collectors and sinners, as Jesus said, preceded them into the kingdom of heaven because they knew something was wrong. And sometimes when our defenses look good, like a religious vocation, we can be caught up on things and be dysfunctional and have no idea because it looks good. And so what I want to share in this video are some different ideas that I think can be helpful to pinpointing this problem. And sometimes in our lives, we can end up with resentments. We can end up with pains, disappointments, resentments. And all these things can be the root of our vocation. Because what can happen is the vocation can become an intrusive thought that is created by an area of pain in the unconscious mind. Metropolitan Jonah Pfaffhausen, he's an Orthodox speaker and cleric, and he speaks about how if we have a resentment, that generates thoughts. In the Eastern tradition, thoughts are called logismoi. And similarly, in the treatment of OCD, it's said that a feared thought is or a feared self is what generates the compulsive thoughts, what generates the fearful thoughts that then lead to the compulsive behavior. So for example, let's say you have an experience of never having any peace in your home growing up. What may happen then is when you hear a child crying, you then feel this sinking feeling, and then you say, I want to be a priest. Because what's happening is the feared self or the wound from your childhood is there in the unconscious. And it has this kind of pain that your needs weren't met there, this kind of disappointment or resentment or fear, is in the unconscious. And then it amplifies something you see, the child screaming, you say, I don't want any children. And then you say, hey, and then your brain does the calculation, the compulsive thought comes up, and it says, oh, be a priest. And so the thing is, all that's happening in this is the problem of generating logismoi from wounds. So the thing is, this is not how this is the process of spiritual dysfunction, not the process of spiritual illumination. And I think that we have to be very clear about whether in our lives or in addition to inspirations, we have these confusing kinds of things going on. And so that is something that I think could be really important for us, because when we do this, when we do this in our lives, we can really start doing a lot of damage to ourselves if we mistake a compulsion for an inspiration. So that is something that's really important. And again, the thing is to wonder, as Metropolitan Jonah was saying in this one video, he was saying, look at your resentments. Look at what your resentments are. For example, many people in society, they end up with father wounds. Like, let's say they say, oh, I don't want to be a man like my father. He was, many people have okay, they have different behavioral problems. Like, let's say that the father was taking drugs, or the father was absent, or the father was angry, or, any of these things that you say, I don't want to be like that. Or let's say the person didn't have a sense of insight, or the person seemed to be all about working, they seem to be always stressed, or all about money, or whatever it was, it seemed meaningless. Whatever these things are, we may try to compensate for it by either, we might double down on it, we might go back the other way. Many times there's a way in which we might, try to go the opposite. A lot of people try to do that. But the thing is to realize that sometimes what we're doing is we're just kind of putting the brakes on because we don't want to be like the people in our lives. Maybe our values sometimes need to be purified because part of this is blended with this thing. And that's, of course, it doesn't mean you don't actually have some values or don't have a point. But the thing is, these points need to be purified, because or else what's going to happen is that you're going to be acting out of these things in a way that is still wounded, and it's still kind of a thing there. So, it's possible that you may still have a religious vocation. It's possible that you may want to be a priest. It's possible that you might not. But you may have to purify out these resentments. When you said the thing is to continue working on the spiritual life, to keep praying, to engage, in prayer that brings about insight, that allows you to process these things in yourself, be continually trying to get insight into yourself. And then that can help you make the right decisions, because the thing is, let's say you're like, oh, I don't want to, maybe let's say you're disappointed in relationships. So you're like, okay, I'm not investing in women anymore. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to work to make money because, I've like things that don't seem to be provided for me. So I'm not going to try anymore. Or, you give up on things. You say, okay, well, people aren't rewarding me for trying to seek out relationship. I'm only being rejected. I'm going to stop doing that. And the thing is, it's like there are these ways that this could be happening. So, we want to look for these resentments and these disappointments and these fears that may be that root that is leading to the logismoi, that is leading to the thoughts coming up into the mind, because we don't want to confuse the mind doing a compulsive solution to an amplification of fear, saying, okay, I have this childhood wound. Ooh, children are loud. That's a fear. And then you say the compulsion, think about being a priest. It's like we don't want that to be the way that it's working. So hopefully this is a helpful video that will enable you to kind of make some of those connections and see if this pattern of confusing a compulsion for an inspiration might be happening in your mind.